to the Web3 Prof podcast.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm the Web3 Prof, Jarrett, coming at you today, and I'm here with Carina Kom. Carina is a game director with MixMob. That's one of her titles, and of course, she also does a few other things. Carina is also event director with both PvP Circuit and also with Diversity in Games. And so I'm going to get Carina to introduce herself, and we're going to chat a little bit about this, plus many other things around Web3 gaming. So thanks for being with me here today.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me, Prof.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate the title. What do you, when we talk about like, okay, Carina Kom, she works in like gaming. Where did this start? Bring us back to like the early days. Give me like a 1 minute kind of, okay, this is how I got into this.
Okay. The Cliff Notes version. I've been working in the video game industry for now 15 years. This will be my 16th year going in. And I started making games when I was 6 years old. I remember my parents sent me to school over the weekend. Really not cool, Mom and Dad. Saturday school, right. Not a good place for a kid or a delinquent like me. So what I found myself doing in these classes, I'd be the kid in the back, and I would be folding origami using Post-it notes, and I'd set up a little board with the Post-it notes, and I'd get all of my friends to come in, and effectively, at the time I didn't know it, I was doing and performing a user test. I was making game design and testing it with my friends when I was 6 years old. So that was the first kind of game that I ever made. You know, being 6 years old, you don't know how to code, or you don't have any of those skills to actually go and make a commercial successful game. And that was my first entry into the video game industry. And I've been playing games since I was at that age as well, starting with Sega and Nintendo, PlayStation, and so forth. I was really lucky because my dad worked in tech as well, so I had access to Game Boys and the little handhelds from multiple generations. We were very fortunate and privileged in that sense. And then, fast forward to when I was in high school, I was tweening. If you're familiar with that term, tweening an ActionScript. I was making content inside of ActionScript. And presenting games for myself mostly and to my peers. And we had digital media classes, we had mixed media classes. And so, again, I think just the benefit of being, generation millennial, maybe Generation X more so, that afforded me the ability to have these exposures to computers.
Was this here in Canada?
Yes.
Okay.
I was in Canada.
So now you said also, did you go to university to study this type of stuff?
No, I did not. And this is something that I want everyone to know about the video game industry, is that as long as you have a portfolio and you can demonstrably do the work, you don't need to go to university. And that's where I think Web3 is so interesting, because it levels the playing field for people like myself, for other artists, for engineers or designers who haven't gone to university. You think this is part of your critical path. I grew up with Asian parents, so we thought this was my critical path.
That's great.
They tell you don't play video games in school, but look at me now, right? Like,
I mean, you just saved a lot of people like $60,000.
Potentially.
Okay, that's amazing. So right now you're a game director. What is a game director? Like, what do you do?
Good question.
Now you're thinking, what do I do?
What do I do? So I would say that a game director understands all facets of game production in design, art, engineering, QA, and overall just how the process works at a very macro level. And if necessary, just like a captain of the ship, you can kind of flitter in and out of all these different disciplines. So at a high level, a game director has to understand how things work, but they also have a really important role in the whole production, in that they have to understand and communicate a comprehensive vision.
Okay, you said something, QA. What's QA?
This stands for quality assurance.
Oh yes, quality assurance. So making sure the game is like up to a certain standard.
Yes.
Okay. So you are the type of person that is, so you know kind of all aspects of the game creation process at some level. I'm sure varying different degrees of expertise. Are you a technical person or a creative person?
I'm more creative than I am technical. Don't think I could do any of the coding to make a smart contract or to deploy a build onto our production environments. But I know enough to be dangerous in those areas.
Yeah.
I know enough to facilitate meaningful conversation.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. And you also said you are involved in a couple organizations as event director for PvP Circuit and Diversity in Games. What are these organizations?
I've been a long-standing events director for Diversity in Games. It was formerly known as Women in Games Vancouver, and formerly Women in Games in Vancouver. We now Diversity in Games. We share the same vision. This is to also provide resources to the underrepresented in our space. So this is previously women. Still something that we want to work on, of course. But I found that the label Women in Games was segregating us from trans folk or non-binary folks or wheelchair users, or what about races? So we really wanted to push forward into another direction that kind of encapsulated that there's more to just being a woman in games. That is important, of course. We need stories from multiple facets to make the games industry interesting and creative and exciting to be in. So that's what the Diversity in Games is. We host events every 2 months or so, where we have women come into our spaces and present ideas from their streams, where it could be an art director will come and talk about art discipline and the workflow, or we might have someone from QA talking about how to break into the industry, and just providing insights to anyone who's looking in and not sure how to start. So that's what Diversity in Games does. And PvP Circuit, now it's the PvP Guild. This does something very different. This is more for the intermediate audience, people who have a game concept and they might be building that concept. They might be even getting close to the end of their cycle and they're ready to launch. This is an opportunity for them to come and pitch their concept to a panel of industry professionals who can provide them insights more on the business side of things. There's one thing I've noticed in the gaming industry, because we're so passionate, this is what we do, we love to play video games, and we love to be creative. One thing that we struggle with the most, being in a creative field, is that sometimes we get very much locked in to the creative side of developing a game, and what happens when we are locked into this grandiose ideas that we never really finish.
Right.
And when we do finish, we realize, that didn't go anywhere. That was made for me. It was more for me than and less for my audience. And I didn't think of marketing. I didn't think of what it would take after I launched the game. I didn't think of PR. I didn't think of live ops and things like that. So at the PvP Circuit, our goal is to listen to your pitch and identify areas where you might want to take another look at, so that you don't spend 8 years in development making a game that won't bring you the success that you wish.
Okay, that's great. That gives us a really good kind of foundation. I'm sure there's a lot to you, I'm sure, that we haven't talked about, of course. So let's talk a little bit about Web3 here, because that is here what we're ultimately here to talk about. So what do you think are the most important features of Web3 that makes it a valuable addition to existing gaming products and existing gaming services that might be on the market here today?
Great question.
Oh, thanks.
Came prepared. So something in the gaming industry that I hope we can accept more. Let's try that again. Okay, it's a great question. Something that I hope we start to see in existing products or services. Web3 is all about transparency and providing information, which to me means trust and security. So that's something I'd love to see more in the gaming industry.
Is that currently something that isn't? Is there a lack of trust and a lack of security in the current gaming industry that we see today?
Not necessarily, but it's more of a power dynamic. Who has the trust and security at that time? Traditionally, game developers have that security, and they're the ones who are overseeing security. They're the ones who decide what happens to a community when that trust is broken. So in Web3 being decentralized, this gives the power over to the players in the community instead, and I think that's quite interesting. And we'll get into that in a minute, is that there's some benefits to having transparent information and ways to build trust and security within a game product. There's also one more thing that I want to add that it's really important that that Web3 make it valuable to existing products and services. That is control over data and assets.
So so you talked about in a minute we're going to talk about some of these pros and cons. Can we just talk about those now?
Sure, let's do it.
I feel like that's going to be really interesting to learn about. So yeah, what's the good and what's the bad or not so good?
Okay.
You got to flick through your notes now.
I go through all my notes.
Because this is the thing, like, so Web3 people, we talk about sometimes Web3 as like, it's going to save the world and all this kind of stuff. And it almost comes across as like, oh, this is a silver bullet. This is going to solve all the problems. And I mean, we need to responsibly recognize the fact that this isn't a panacea and a silver bullet, and there's lots of things that we need to work out. And so when we think about, okay, there are some good things and there are some bad things, like decentralization, scalability, security. We call this the blockchain trilemma. There are sacrifices that need to be made in order for some of these things to work. So, but coming from a game perspective, which I don't know anything about games at all. I've never played video games ever in my life. And so, yeah, I know it's true. Like I've never,
Jared, get out of here.
I've never, like I had like a Sega Genesis when I was a kid, I guess, for a minute, and I didn't play it. I don't know. It was never a thing for me. So this is a world I don't know anything about. And so I'm very excited to hear. I feel like I should have said this in the intro. I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on this. So, okay, so tell us about pros and cons.
Okay, before I go in there, not to distract us too much, but do you know who Sonic is? Do you know who Mario? Okay.
Yeah, I know who these people are because I have children.
Okay.
But I have no personal experience with them. Actually, okay, so this is wild. I've actually met Mario. The actual person, this is a sidebar. Mario was named after a guy named Mario Segale. And I used to work in the luxury hotel business. And Mario Segale was one of our regular guests. And Nintendo couldn't pay their rent, and they named Mario after him in lieu of rent because he was their landlord. And I've got lots of non-PG stories about Mario Segale. He's since passed away, but he was a wild character. And I met him when he was about 85 years old, and he was living the life of a rock star. So I've got a personal relationship with the game.
Okay.
But anyways, back to things that actually matter. Tell us about the pros and cons.
All right, so we talked about the power dynamics being shifted over from developers now into the community. This is part of the decentralization, part of transparency, part of surfacing information. There's also the interoperability of our game assets. So traditionally speaking, let's say Mario, take that example. When I play a Mario game, I have to play this on my Switch or my mobile device. And if I were to purchase any assets within Mario in that game, well, now I'm kind of stuck in that one game. So when I say interoperability, it's two things, really. It's the true ownership of those assets to be pulled out of the Mario game. And then part of the interoperability is, well, what if I could take that Mario asset and I could put it into a Sonic game? Or what if I could take that same asset and I could put it into a FIFA game? Or another All-Stars game. So I think that's another advantage of Web3 gaming.
Okay, so I hear this idea of interoperability and composability all the time. In fact, I've just done a recording with some of the founders of Flow Blockchain on this exact topic. Tell me this. So I take my Mario and I put it into FIFA and I'm playing soccer with my Mario character. And he has some assets that I bought, so some cool hats or something like that. It looks weird. Like he's a cartoon, everybody else looks real. Like, how do we deal with that type of stuff? Because this kind of composability is constantly talked about in Web3, but it seems like there's lots of issues. But am I thinking about this from a small mind? Is there a bigger picture here that I'm missing?
That's a fantastic question. Traditionally, when we go through a game cycle, there's an art director who sets the standards, provides guidelines, clear guidelines to follow, so that we don't have that uncanny valley. We don't have that ratchet sense of this asset doesn't belong. Something looks different here. And I think this is something that's becoming quite relevant with today's generation of gamers, like Fortnite and Roblox and even Minecraft to an extent. They have an element of customization. So as long as we can provide those guidelines to keep the art style in as long as we have those guidelines that keep the art style in the upholding the vision and the values of the community and the developers in tandem, then we can break the rules. So it's kind of like, I like to cook a lot, so, or bake, you got to measure things, you have to be very precise, but every once in a while you can break the rules. And so thinking about the games like Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft, having that element of customization actually pushes us forward into a new era of something called user-generated content. And this is a self-sustaining property. Having user-generated content can help prolong the lifetime of a game, enhance the community, and give players something to do. Now, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, Jared.
Oh, thank you.
There's certainly an element of aesthetic that we need to be mindful of. And in the foreseeable future, in the next layer of user-generated content, we're likely going to see some ratchet-looking games, some weird and wacky games that just don't fit right, and we're going to have to find a way to kind of curate a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, those video games you listed are like my children's dream is like, they just love, and Brawl Stars. Brawl Stars came out with a new character last week, and my two boys were just like amped, just desperately trying to find an iPad so they could look at this new character that was released. And I'm trying to break their addiction, unsuccessfully. Is there anything else? So those are some, did we only talk about one thing?
That was the advantages, yeah.
Okay. We're not going to get very far here today, are we? Yeah. Okay. What are the challenges?
For Web3 gaming, the challenges right now are comprehension, right? We need to educate the layman and get more adopting users to come in. And I mean this lovingly, right? It's not easy to come in and just get a wallet and jump into the game. There has to be accessibility points from the very beginning. And that's traditionally not something that we're very good at in game development. In game development, thinking about UI, that's user interface, comes in much later. It's more downstream than it is upstream. Okay. So user experience and user interface needs to be thought of at the beginning. And that's one change that I've noticed coming into Web3 from traditional gaming. So the comprehension is not there, and that's a disadvantage that we currently face. As you mentioned, there's scalability issues that we're looking at as it's a decentralized server. You know how mind-boggling that is for someone like myself coming in from a large studio where the server room is there on site, and if something were to go wrong, I can just run down to the servers and like pull some plugs and whatnot. Having a decentralized server means if something goes wrong, I got no fucking idea what's happening. So
if you've built on Solana and Solana goes down, which sometimes it famously does, so no one can play your game that day? Is that the situation?
Yes.
Okay.
That is true.
However, what we're told in Web3 is that your network shouldn't fail, or it doesn't fail. Like Bitcoin networks never come down, from what I understand, and that's not the case seemingly with all layer 1 blockchains. But I guess, is there a decreased risk in Web3 that your decentralized network is going to come down versus the server in your basement, which, like, what if the power goes out, then it goes down?
It's the same for both. In both scenarios, it would be the same risk. Yeah. I've spoken to a number of other game developers who have their servers in their basement and they had a flood. Right. Suddenly their servers are down. That's out of their control. So the risk would be roughly the same. Okay. However, we have a little bit less control because those servers aren't on site. It's definitely a challenge that impacts market size, and that's a disadvantage that we currently have. But I remain optimistic. It wasn't so long ago we had so we sent someone to the moon, right? And we had computers that were the size of this room, and now it's shrinking to the size of a microchip. So it's just really a matter of time until we get to a point where that scalability of servers is no longer a big blocker for us. There's volatility as well that makes blockchain just not as accessible as I'd like it to be. Again, that comes back to educating users at the forefront and letting them know that this is a safe space. It's going to be a space where gamers can thrive in the future. And in order for us to do that effectively, one thing that I believe is currently a challenge, a short-term challenge, I'll admit, is the lack of good content.
Like the lack of good games?
Yeah.
You mean? Okay. So all the games are kind of garbage.
Not all the games.
I mean, I can say that, but maybe you can't.
Not all the games, but it's like the gold rush, and we see this. I've been around long enough in the gaming industry to see how history kind of repeats itself, like fashion. I was around when Web2 gaming was becoming a thing, back when Facebook gaming, just before mobile gaming really took off. We saw the same kind of challenges. We saw the same pushback and resistance from uneducated users who didn't understand why you want to go to mobile phone, and there was a lot of cash grab, a lot of rug pulls of developers who just saw this pioneering opportunity as a gold rush, and you know, unfortunately that's kind of where we are right now.
Okay. How does it feel? I think pioneering opportunity is a cool term. How does it feel for you to be in a pioneering scenario where you're building something with MixMob that is like on the leading edge of what we believe is the future of all things internet?
Super cool. Like I said, I've been around since Web 2, so I'm familiar with the ups and downs, and I'm prepared for some high points and low points. It's exciting. It always is exciting when something new comes into the market, and especially something like Web3 blockchain features. This happens so quickly, and I want to tell all of my game development friends out there that being in the crypto space is like game development on steroids or game development on Octane, because it happens so quickly.
And what do they say? Are they like, forget it, I'm comfortable? What's their reaction?
Yep.
They're making tons of cash. They're happy.
Yeah, no, they're happy, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Right? Just like in Web 2, as mobile gaming was taking off, we saw mobile gaming as a different niche, adjacent to gaming, contributing to the global ecosystem and economy of the gaming industry. Blockchain gaming, I suspect, will be its own thing as well in the future, because there really are users out there who want to own their assets and truly own their assets in a decentral way. Those users will not be satisfied with the offerings of traditional game development, and that's fine. Those developers have a leg up because they have access to tools and processes that are from legacy, from 30 to 40 years worth of game development history. Those developers have access to that knowledge for many, many years. So coming into blockchain, it's like a wild, wild west over here. Some of my colleagues are excited by it. Some of them are unsure about them. But I mostly find that people are ambivalent to it. They maybe don't understand how quickly things will change.
Okay. Now on this podcast, we've talked a lot about like ownership over, you know, dozens of episodes. But in a game, if I'm playing Roblox or whatever the game is, and I buy assets, okay, in the game, can I not sell them within the game? Because we talk about like true ownership. So I understand that may not be true ownership, that I don't actually own those assets and they could be taken from me. If I leave the game, I can't take them with me. But in the game, can I sell them and get my dollars back and then go reinvest into some other game? Or am I really stuck? Because, and this is really speaking to like the non-gaming audience who isn't there playing these types of games.
Yeah. So traditionally, game developers don't like it when you take things out if it's worth real money.
Of course.
So no, you can't. You're usually at a deficit once you spend real dollars in any video game of today, any traditional video game of today. It is there. It belongs to the developer now. You might get some sort of credit. You might get some sort of in-game token that you can use for other things.
But I can't cash out.
You cannot.
Okay. I think that's really helpful because, you know, like I hear sometimes my university students talk about like how much money they spend or how much the things that they maybe have bought in the game have gone up in value, but the value that they have accrued can't leave the game. No,
although to be fair, there are workarounds, and we've seen this before.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the game World of Warcraft?
I've heard that word.
Yeah, it's like 2 decades old.
Okay.
Whatever, it's the thing.
Yeah.
Back in the day when World of Warcraft users were just getting into World of Warcraft, they would level up their characters to like level 70. They would collect the best gear. They go on raiding parties to go and get all this stuff with their friends. And what they did as a workaround, they would take their account and they would sell that account on eBay. So there is a workaround.
So they would sell their username.
They would. They would sell the entire account with that character, with all the assets they've accrued through their rating to sell. And it would go for thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So isn't that interesting, Jarrett? That there is signs in the past of players desiring true ownership of their assets, and they found a workaround to sell it for real life dollars. So what if we just made that easier?
Yeah. And so is the disadvantage to the game developer, they don't want to, obviously decentralization is a big part of this in Web3. They're giving up control. And there's a disincentive for the game developers to give up control because I think, are they less financially rewarded in that case? Or do you see it the opposite? No,
not necessarily. I think actually quite the opposite, due to the fact that we have something called a smart contract. And the smart contract is, traditionally, I'm a producer, director, and I have a contract drafted for you, the artist, and you sign that contract releasing the ownership of your IP or licensed asset to me. And I can go and take that asset and then be commercially successful with that asset. With a smart contract now, once the deal is done and you sign your life away, there could be a clause in that contract that says, no, in perpetuity now, Jarrett, the artist, will receive 10% of sales revenue from this day forward. And that's baked into the smart contract. And you don't need to rely on me being there. I don't even really, I would just be a middle person at that point. You don't even need me to be there. It's built on this trust of the smart contract that you will forever get some sort of benefit by building with Web3 features for your smart contract. And it's not something we can really do in a traditional sense because we rely on a middle person. So this is where I think it could be really interesting for developers to kind of stretch your mind a little bit. That the introduction of the smart contract is revolutionary for all of these assets that, millions of assets belong in a game. How would we oversee this? How would we curate that if not for a smart contract?
Do you think that we're going to get to a place where all 100%, let's say 80% of games are in the world of Web3? Is there an incentive? Is there a reason for everybody or most games to move in this direction? Or is it possible that a bunch of them are just like, you know what, this old way is actually really great for us?
I think that's fine. It's like, do you like rap music? Or do you like hip-hop? Or do you like country music? There's Web3 and blockchain gaming is a flavor. It's a different kind of, almost like a genre in itself. And people who want true ownership, who believe in the power of the smart contract and the benefits to not just the developers, but the community itself, they will be there indulging all of that.
Right.
That's not to say that it can't happen. We just have, scalability challenges, regulation challenges, etc. So it is actually easier to make a traditional game as it stands. But over time, technology will advance. And I truly believe your kids, for example, they love Fortnite. If they could have a Fortnite as it is right now, or they could have a Fortnite in the future where they own their assets and they can sell those assets and they can take those assets into Minecraft, what do you think they would pick?
Well, I think even what would their parents pick?
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because the decision maker in lots of these situations, although the influencer is the child, certainly often the decision maker is the parent, depending on how old the kids are, right? But for like my 5 to 9-year-old kids, like we're making the decision on what games we allow them to play, generally ignorantly, but we make the decision. And of course, if there's a financial incentive for us as parents to like be able to take those assets with us and also understand that, we're going to direct our kids to that area as long as they're safe and secure and they're not going to get taken advantage of by some creep, right?
No, that makes sense. And I'm thinking of kids your kids are young
They're
now.
young, yeah. Yeah.
But in 10 years, the gaming industry is still going to be here.
Of course.
So what would they do in 10 years? They
Yeah.
are currently growing up in this world where digital asset and ownership is like a tangible thing for them. And they desire this, even at this young age, they desire that. I have a nephew, and I bought him a game for Christmas, a physical game for Nintendo Switch. And when I gave it to him, he kind of gave me this weird look, and he was like, "Oh, thank you." And I was like, "No, you don't like this. Let's refund it for something. Let's exchange it." So we went to Best Buy, and I showed him all the games out there, like Donkey Kong, Kirby, Mario Party, like all these cool games. Gave him a recommendation, showed him the reviews, and at the end of the day, he pulled me over to like the little gift card trolley, and he said, "I want that." And he pointed to a gift card that was like $40 for Roblox. That is what he wanted.
Oh,
he
interesting.
wanted to invest into Roblox. So, and he was only 14 at that time. So I'm just thinking that 14-year-old plus 10, 24-year-old, he's growing up owning assets in Roblox, and he's going to realize that putting money into Roblox right now is a decimate. There's a 100% chance you will not get that money back anytime. But if you were to shift your mindset into true ownership, then if you sell in a secondary market in the future, 10 years from now, you could get 20% back or 30% back. You're not at 100% loss, and that's the hump that we have to jump to.
Yeah. So what do you think Web3 gaming is going to look like, I don't know, next year, in 4 years? What is the future?
Good question. So first, we need to tackle the challenges. We need to get mass adoption.
Yeah.
That's number one. We also need to
The user experience.
improve the user experience. Yeah, that's
It's complicated. Seed phrases, all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to make that as smooth as possible.
And do you think that Web3 games are going to deal with that?
I do. I do think that.
Certainly during the hype of kind of like the metaverse. When was that? In October of 2021, I'm going to say. There was all this like, okay, metaverse stuff and whatever. And a lot of people believed, and I'm not sure if they still do, that kind of gaming was the on-ramp of Web3. Like that's how people are going to get into crypto, is because billions of people play games. And so this is the way forward. But there obviously need to be some improvements. Some of the cons that you had mentioned, I guess, need to be addressed. Anything else?
A couple things. And I want to come back to what you just said there, because, gaming provides utility to NFTs that wasn't there before. Without the utility, then this NFT is just a profile picture. And, people call it the magic JPEG. But with gaming, it's actually providing utility that you can use in-game for play-to-earn games or play for fun games. And that's really exciting. But other things that we should consider for the blockchain evolution: increased adoption, coming to parity with tool sets.
What does that mean?
So right now, in our industry, there's PlayStation 5, there's new Xbox, and these games look so realistic in their aesthetic. The fidelity of a human face, like you can see the skin particles, you can see the beard, the hairs of the beard, the hairs of the eyebrows. That is so cool. That is the leading technology for traditional game development. In blockchain, because we have other challenges to get to, like scalability, security, etc. We're not there yet.
Right.
Once we get to parity, once we can showcase the same level of high quality as traditional games on like PlayStation in performance and aesthetic and some design as well, that's going to be the future for blockchain gaming. At that point, it's going to be pretty obvious what side you pick, between which Fortnite you pick. I think blockchain will be something that people will have in the back of their minds.
Okay.
We'll have improved uses for NFTs as well. The NFT will become a lot more interesting and exciting and desirable from the perspective of a user. I think there's going to be more opportunities for transmedia.
Transmedia.
Yes. So, we have the idea of interoperability, taking an asset and using it in a different game space or a different product altogether. For transmedia, and we see this already, because I had asked you, there's a Mario movie and there's a Mario game, and it's available on your phones, available on your Switch. It's also a movie you can watch. Same with Sonic. There's going to be more opportunities for transmedia to exist because of this collaborative space that we're in. I might make a game, then you might make a children's book, then you might make an NFT, or you might make a series on Netflix, for example.
Yes.
And then me personally, what I'd love to see in the future of blockchain gaming is getting more Web3 experiences into the mobile phone, and also promoting or enhancing esports and competitive games in the space.
Okay. Man, I feel like, well, I think we should do another podcast episode.
I'm down.
Because there's also, I mean, I feel like there's so many things. I mean, we should talk about play to earn and play to learn and play to move and play to whatever. We got to talk about, like, you know, the app store and how many problems that causes, you know, wallet integrations and app stores and how we get around it. There's a lot of things we need to talk about. So I feel like we just got into some things, but I feel like this has also opened up maybe a lot more conversation. I think I underestimated this podcast episode in the content that we should cover, because there's so many interesting things to this. And as you're talking, I'm just like, my mind is turning as to like, oh my God, yeah, well, what about that? We should talk about this. We should talk about that. So, so I think this has been really a fascinating introductory for us, level 1 into blockchain games. And I think that we need to talk more about this, because I think there's lots of areas that we can dive into. So I'm not going to make you commit to that on the air, because, you know, maybe you don't want to come back and talk to me. But for example, if you did, we could talk about those things. But this has been so helpful. It really is interesting to hear your perspective as a game director for an actual game that actually happens, that actually exists right now. It's not like a game that, you know, somebody is thinking about doing one day. And so it's cool to talk to like a real life person who's doing this in real life, which is super exciting. So, Carina, I really appreciate you being with me here today. It's been super fun and super educational, and I hope we can have more conversations soon.
Right on. Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been fun.
Okay, great. Thank you.